Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. All is now set for today's inauguration of a new Federal Executive Council by President Muhammadu Buhari of Nigeria. And joining us now to talk about it in relation to how all of this can come together to reposition the economy for recovery is Dr. Suleiman Barnabas, a political and development sociology, and currently the chair of the Department of Sociology and Anthropology at Base University, Abuja. Welcome to the program, Dr. Barnabas. Good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Yes, Dr. Barnabas.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, good. Thank you for honoring our invitation. Let's start with the just concluded presidential retreat for minister designates who would hopefully be given their portfolios by 11 a.m. Nigerian time today. What's your assessment of the conversation at that retreat, particularly the president's charge to the ministers designate about working together as a team, about what their task will be, and the achievements which he outlined of his administration so far, and then particularly what some people have interpreted as an attempt by the president to restrict access to him when he said, look, any minister that wants to see him should book an appointment or go through the chief of staff. And for council memos, they should walk through the office of the secretary to the government of the federation.
Yes, first of all, I think that Nigerians have waited impatiently, to see that the cabinet of the president is inaugurated. And we hope that today also, as they are inaugurated, their portfolios also will be given to them. Nigerians, voted this government and expected it to hit the ground running. As it is, I mean, we're already late. And looking at the speech of the president, it's obvious that he's aware that the country is not living up to what Nigerians expect, and he wants the ministers to hit the ground running. However, that will be dependent on the portfolio that he gives to each of them, because I mean, if a minister that is not knowledgeable in a particular sector is appointed, given that portfolio, he might find it difficult to meet that expectation. So the president also would do well to appoint ministers into positions that they are very knowledgeable about. And also these ministers also must know that this appointment is not just for their self-elevation. This appointment is to meet the needs of Nigerians. And to that extent, they should try as much as possible to avoid grandstanding. They should avoid trying to, being carried away by their new positions, and work for the interest of Nigerians.
What are your thoughts? I'm going to just carry on from where Dr. Abatsi left off with regards to that instruction given by the president on how to reach him. If it's meetings, appointments, the ministers are instructed to apply through the chief of staff. Regarding the Federal Executive Council matters, through the secretary to the federal government. It's quite a detached form of leadership. What are the implications? And if you recall, in 2017, that leaked memo, which has since been denied by the then Minister of State for Petroleum, Ibe Kachuku, in which he said that he had not been able to have access to the president for 6 months. What are the implications of this kind of leadership?
Well, I think that the president is just re-echoing, what has always been the case. From the memo that Kachuku, that was available to the public from him, showed that there have been cases where ministers have been restricted from seeing the president, restrained from seeing the president when they wanted to do so. I think that leadership is about, meeting the needs of the people. And the ministers are actually those who are in charge of the ministries, the departments that do the day-to-day running of governance. I mean, and so I particularly, I'm really surprised that that kind of instruction is coming forth. I hope that the chief of staff will be someone of discretion to the extent that he does not allow politics, to affect such access, to the president. As ministers, they are the ones who will have to marshal the policies of government. And so if we want to put it right, they run the government with the president. And so such restrictions, such directives, should be carried out with a lot of conscientiousness, a lot of, the interest of the people at heart, so that the chief of staff, does not take advantage of that, enormous, if you like, powers that have been entrusted to him by the president to deny those that he feels are not carrying out his instructions to his own taste, or that he feels that are not in line with his own, political leanings. So I hope that that instruction does not turn out to be something that stands as an impediment between the president and his ministers, because they need to work together. The president, is not just, someone that should be seen as inaccessible. Already Nigerians are complaining that they cannot hear from their president as it should be. And now if ministers are finding it difficult to access the president, if that's the impression, then I think it's not good for appropriately marshalling, running the country as it should be, because in the final analysis, these cabinet ministers are actually the ones that will direct the policies of government, and so it should not, it should not be hard for them to have access to the president at any time when the need arises.
Well, we hope not, because unfortunately that's the case that we've been seeing, or that's the way it looks. But another great issue that's come up is the fact that there is no minister appointed from the FCT. There are 43 ministers, and now there's a push for the president to install a 44th minister from the FCT to take care of the indigenous people of that area. What is your take on this? What is your take on the fact that the president didn't think, even though it says so in the Constitution, that he should appoint a minister, one minister from the FCT? I'd like to know what you think about that.
Yes, I mean, we are a multi-ethnic society. And you see, we always hear that reality is nothing, perception is everything. And in politics, in governance, it's important that the people, the constituents, have a sense of belonging. It's not just the FCT, the people, the Igala people. I mean, I think that Igalas are about the 7th largest ethnic group in this country. And there's no Igala person who is a minister in this government. An Igala person is not even the governor now because of the, what you can easily call, monarchical, democracy that happened in Kogi State, where, someone from the minority is currently the governor of Kogi State, and then the Igalas also, majority, they don't have a minister to represent them at the national level, at the state level, where they are clearly the majority. The governor it's not from there. And you see, so again, coming back to FCT, I think that that's a legitimate demand. It's a legitimate demand because they don't have a governor to represent them. Just one senator. Whereas Bayelsa State, with its very small population, has 3 senators. So if there are constitutional restrictions or that have undermined some of these things, then the president should also be very meticulous in taking decisions that affect a section of the Nigerian people, for which people will actually react. So I think that the people are making a legitimate demand, and not just the people from FCT. there are other ethnic nationalities that feel shortchanged by the current appointment of the ministers of the president.
Well, Dr. Barnabas, well, I don't want to, I'm not being mischievous. I see you are making a strong case for the Igala people. Are you by any chance Igala? Hello? You don't want to answer. Okay, your smile says it all.
Of course.
Yeah, because we asked you a question about the...
I am an Igala man.
We asked you a question about the Gwari people. You had to bring in your own ethnic group, but it's fine. It's perfect.
Yes, of course. The Igalas are more than the Gwari people. The Igalas are more than Idomas. The Igalas are more than, so many ethnic groups where you have, you have some ethnic people, who are, some states producing two ministers.
Well,
you see,
if,
each
Dr.
time
Barnabas,
that you make these things
Dr. Barnabas, if we were to choose, ministers
yes,
and ensure the representation of every ethnic group, we'll probably have over 400 ministers working for President Buhari. But I get your point. Your point is made. But one point that came out of the presidential retreat is this concern about, a likely fiscal crisis. And that point was raised by Vice President Yemi Osinbajo. And he said it's something that, every step must be taken. Government is looking in the direction of expanding the tax net, even beyond the 20 million adults that they claim have been captured within the tax net in the last 4 years. What other ideas would you like to recommend to the government beyond increasing taxation? Because we see after the memo that was sent to the chairman of the FIRS, apart from the fact that he responded to the memo, which came from the office of the president, the next thing we saw was that, he started announcing people on whose accounts lien had been placed. And, but what would you recommend before we take a break?
Well, you see, when economies grow, it's not just about taxation. There are so many factors that policymakers must take into consideration.
Well, Dr. Barnabas, maybe we'll take the break. Dr. Barnabas, let's take the break. And then when we come back, you can talk about those factors. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Still with us in the studio is Dr. Suleiman Barnabas, the chair of the Department of Sociology and Anthropology at Base University in Abuja. Well, Dr. Barnabas, before we went on break, you were talking about certain factors that would need to be addressed to be able to address, to deal with the economic crisis in Nigeria.
Yes. So like I was saying, you see, from what we have seen in the last 4 years or so, it's important that we now have to change our tactics. And that's why the chairman of the ruling party was talking about fiscal crisis. Because there have been heavy taxation, there have been protectionist policies to see if that can revive the economy. But what we can see, the economy is not growing. And so I think that at this point, we should engage in expansionary fiscal policy that can help the economy. One, by reducing, if possible, even reducing personal income taxes so that people can have money to spend. It's also important that government can give tax breaks to corporate organizations, particularly those that have had to sack their employees because they can no longer afford to pay wages. Also, it's important that the ministers that are coming, particularly the Minister of Finance, must sit down with the CBN governor and take decisions that will help the economic growth, decisions that will help employment, to boost the employment rate of the country. Because at over 23% unemployment rate for a country as Nigeria is that bad. Then, of course, there are other things that government must do, such as investing heavily in infrastructure. And that's where the fiscal crisis is coming in, a situation where there's so much demand on government spending, and yet the revenue, the revenues are not there. So I think that government has to sit down again and review their existing policies, so that if there are steps that needs to be taken to increase, to attract FDI, and also, probably reduce, some of these their protectionist policies that have deterred investors from coming in. I think these are the things that government needs to do to help solve the fiscal crisis that we're in.
Well, I don't think we should expect any tax breaks, since we all saw that memo to the chairman of FIRS, Babatunde Fowler. He's under pressure to boost tax revenues. So I don't think it's going to go the opposite direction. But I wanted to ask you, the trend that we observed in the previous term of the Buhari administration was that he did not reshuffle or sack any of his ministers, regardless of shortfalls in performance, if we could put it that way. We have no idea for the next few hours, or, well, about 2 hours, when it's announced who is getting what portfolio. But he has said that he will put an expert to man the Ministry of Agriculture. If that is a policy now, why is it that we did not see that in the previous term, given the importance that agriculture has to this administration? And what are your hopes, with that in mind, that he will get it right this time and put square pegs in square holes, round pegs in round holes?
Yes, I think that the president himself has realized that there were certain things that he ought to have done in the first tenure, which he didn't do, which actually undermined the progress of the country. So I want to say that this time around, the president has made the right decision by saying people who are knowledgeable on certain aspects, experts should be appointed to man those, should be given the portfolios that actually match their competencies. You see, it's not just about the positions that people are given. People must also have the dispositions to match. And when people are not performing, of course, the president needs to change that perception, because the perception that most Nigerians have is that once the president has appointed you, whether you are performing or not, if you are loyal, if he just leaves it, that should change. The new ministers that will come in after 1 year, if there's no progress in their ministries, if they are not delivering, I think that there should be either reshuffled, or, if possible, asked to go. Now, it shouldn't just be only the agri sector. All sectors of the Nigerian society, people who will be appointed to positions of power, positions of responsibility, must be people who are capable, irrespective of religion, irrespective of tribe, irrespective of even the political party that they belong to, because there are people who don't even belong to any political party, and yet they are very good at what they do, and such persons should be appointed. The president is no longer the president of a political party. It's not the president of a political party. It's not the president of any section. It's the president of Nigeria and Nigerians. And so people who are capable, people who can help, boost the economy, people who can bring his policies, and even probably his aspiration that 100 million people should be brought out of poverty within the next 10 years. People who can drive those policies must be brought in. And when they are not performing, of course, nobody should be allowed to stay once you are not performing. Because leadership is about contribution. It's not just about settling people who have contributed to the party. It is when people go into leadership with that mentality that they don't perform. Because as soon as they are appointed today, I can tell you that even the attitude of our people, you see chieftaincy titles coming their way, you see the press will turn their attention on them, and some of them are carried away with these things. Instead of performing, they start going for parties, they start marrying more wives, for those who already have, and so on and so forth. I don't expect this cabinet to engage in such frivolities, and I hope that the president will be watching, so that each time that people are not performing, or a particular person is not performing, they are shown the way.
coming in. And when this list of the ministerial nominees initially came out, the PDP, through their spokesperson, described the list as uninspiring. What is your direct take, actually, on this list? You've gone about what we should expect, etc., what we hope we don't get, what we hope we do get, but we know the people that are coming in. We know the people receiving their portfolios in under 2 hours. What do you think about this crop of 43 ministers?
Well, I wouldn't leverage on the position or opinion of PDP, because PDP will always, as an opposition party, you don't expect them, particularly people who still believe that this government came in through, illegitimate means. And so you don't expect them to say good things about them. Unfortunately, some of these people that are in this government that have been nominated as ministers were ministers under PDP, were governors under PDP, and PDP praised them to high heavens. So let's drop politics aside and actually, the time for partisanship is over, and now it's time for partnership. And I want to also say that the PDP and all opposition parties, opposition in the figures must come together and see how Nigeria works. My opinion about the 43 ministers designate is that they can actually do well. You see, you don't need to be a good leader, you don't need to be a professor. You don't need to even have all the experiences in the world. All you need is to have a good heart, is to be courageous, so that you let the president know what ought to be done on a particular issue. If the president is not towing that line, and you feel that that is not the best decision the president is coming up with, the honorable thing to do is to resign. You see, people should not mortgage, or people should not, sacrifice their integrity, their competence and all for just political experiences. So I think that the ministers have a chance. We should give them the chance to perform. All they need to do is to have a good heart. They should shun corruption, because that's one of the greatest disadvantages to whatever intentions they come up with. By the time they now start having interest and prejudice.
Dr. Barnabas would be rounding this up shortly, but before we do so, I need your quick response on this other matter. People have been speculating that the 14 returning ministers on the list of ministers designate, that the president is likely to take them back to their old portfolios. Is that necessarily a good thing or a bad thing? Quickly.
Well, those who have performed very well in the ministries that they were manning before, in the last regime, can be returned. Of course, there are others who haven't done very well. Maybe they should be posted to other ministries. And
Dr. Barnabas, just hold your thoughts there. We'll take another short break and we'll come back to you. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Here with us in our Abuja studio is Dr. Suleiman Barnabas, a political and development sociologist, and currently the chair of the Department of Sociology and Anthropology at Base University in Abuja. Dr. Barnabas, before we went on that short break, you were commenting on whether it's a good thing or a bad thing for those ministers who are returning, 14 of them, to be taken back by President Buhari to their former portfolios.
Yes, like I was saying, that's the discretion of the president. I think that the ones that have done very well in their previous role, I think that the Minister of Transport has did a very good work. If he's returned, I wouldn't have a problem with that. Again, there are other ministers that have not performed to the expectations of Nigerians, but have been returned. Such ministers can actually be assigned to other portfolios. Good enough, we have new ministers that are coming. If they are likely going to do well based on their experiences, based on their knowledge, competencies and all in previous assignments, wherever they are coming from, they can be considered to man such ministries. Like I said earlier, what is important is that just have a good heart, have the courage, have the passion to serve this country without enriching yourself, be willing to sacrifice, your personal and political interests for the interest of Nigerians and the suffering masses at the moment. And once that is your passion and commitment, definitely the person will be able to do well in whatever ministry that the person is assigned to, especially when he's knowledgeable in that area.
You mentioned the Minister of Transportation, that's Rotimi Amechi, and in your view, he did a good job and he should be allowed to return to his former ministry. And then you said some others who did not perform well are also returning. We would like to name those ones, having identified somebody who, in your opinion, did well.
I'm sorry, I will not be able to do that. I will choose not to do that because that will raise a lot of questions as to what indicators. I mean, what I mean here is that when I do my content analysis, by looking at what the newspaper reviews, opinions of people and all about ministers that have done very well, I think a standout is Rotimi Amechi, so I would say that the president knows. He knows very well. I will also say that finance, the Minister of Finance, it's not just about a gender thing or even, they should look at it very well. If you look at the cabinet of Lagos State, I'm sure you have seen the people that have been assigned as appointed as commissioners and their qualifications and the portfolios they are manning. You will know that, these are seasoned people in their fields. So the president should take that into consideration. I mean, already we know that the president knows who is going to get what already. After 1 year of serving the Nigerian people, if they are not performing, they should either be reshuffled or they should be asked to go so that other good Nigerians, irrespective of political parties, irrespective of religion, irrespective of the ethnic nationality of the person, can be actually called to serve the Nigerian people. It's not a favor to call someone to come and serve the Nigerian people. If someone is good enough, in some countries, they beg them to come and serve. Unfortunately, here you see people lobbying, people wanting to kill themselves to get political appointment because they are looking for what to get for themselves and their children. And that's where the problem is.
Yes, politics is a high-stakes game because there's so much to be gained from it. I wanted to just take you quickly off topic for a second, if I may, and talk about the book that you wrote about demagoguery in the democratic politics of the Fourth Republic, wherein you discuss, amongst other topics, the fact that even in a democratic process, like an election, the people's voice is not necessarily heard, and that those who are elected are not necessarily the people's choice. Can you bring that to 2019, to its relevance today?
Well, yes, and if you look at that book, it's not just talking about the presidential election. You must also look at the state, because the greatest disservice in our democratic politics is not even at the presidential level. It is the local and state levels where people are imposed on the people, where leaders are imposed on the people. And each time that the ideals of democracy are not upheld, each time that people emerge as governors, you saw what happened in Kanu, you saw what happened in Osun State, you saw what happened in Kogi State, a situation where leaders emerge as governors or as senators, House of Assembly members, House of Rep, without getting the mandate of the people. You can't hold them accountable for their actions. And so demagoguery actually is an aberration of the ideals of democratic politics. And so when leaders emerge through all kinds of manipulations, either at the party level or at the actual elections, then you have a problem at hand, because competent people, people whom the people know can serve their interests, may be shortchanged, may be stopped from emerging as leaders. And that's my view. And in 2019, we are going to see a situation where the courts will have to decide on some of those cases, particularly at the state and local levels, to see whether those people that we now call governors were actually appointed by the people or not.
Okay, well, maybe some people were shortchanged because before the president actually nominated his ministers, he did put out a statement saying that he wants to choose people that he's close to or knows in order for him to work well with them. So what are your thoughts on this stance that the president had towards choosing this set of 43 ministers? Do you think that this is a fair stance for the president to have taken? Adding on to this, from the first point that Tundu and Dr. Abati made when we started this conversation, how does that then play in with the fact that they can't even have direct access to him? He mentioned exactly how they should go about contacting him, yet these are people that he claims he has close relationships with, as that is the basis for him choosing them.
Yes, well, it depends on how you interpret it, because he could as well say that since he knows them and he knows what they are capable of doing, they don't even need to see him to do well. Well, that would be on the political interpretation to it. But again, like I earlier said, the president should not restrict his ministers from having access to him, because they are the ones who carry out the day-to-day, they supervise the day-to-day running of government, particularly in their own ministries. And so they should have access to him. Again, when the president tells us that he has appointed people that he knows very well, I think that probably the cabinet within the context of Abba Kyari, the ministers within the context of Malami, you know, and a few of them. Because, you see, the president may not be too, you know, knowledgeable about some of his ministers, because some of them are actually suggested to him. And so if he has confidence in those party leaders who have nominated some of these ministers, he could as well say, well, I trust the people who are recommending these people to me, and within that framework, he's coming up to tell us that these people, I know them better, they are going to do it. Like I said, you see, intentions are not enough in democratic politics especially, or dividends of democracy. It's not just about the intention. The outcomes of the intentions will be what people will judge you with. And in the next 1 year or so, we are going to see whether the people the president claims to know very well will live up to the expectations of the president and also of Nigerians. And if they fail, I mean, we've seen people who know their wives very well divorce their wives, and their husbands very well also divorce their husbands. And so if these people that the president knows very well fail to perform, then the president should do the right thing by letting them go. We've seen a situation where the president knew and still knows Babashir Lawal very well, but when the realities showed that he didn't know him so much, he had to let him go. He should also use the same approach when these people that he knows very well are not performing, or when they go against his principle of anti-corruption, so that they can also be given the same treatment.
Dr. Barnabas, I'm aware that you are also an economist, and earlier on, you had commented on options for addressing the challenge of fiscal crisis. And you made a comment about some of the policies that have been adopted by the Buhari administration. And in that regard, I would like you to comment on the recent directive by the president to the CBN governor that access should be restricted to Forex for food imports. There's been a lot of controversy around that, but what's your own opinion?
You see, some of these policies actually are responsible for the fiscal crisis that we have. Because when you are too protective, because that's a protectionist policy, when you are too protective of the indigenous firms and indigenous entrepreneurs, you see the competitiveness that comes with the free market enterprise will not be there. I think that there are different ways of, if we go back to the issue of taxation now, there are different methods of funding expenditures, you know, of raising revenue. Taxation is just one of them. I mean, governments can use seigniorage. Governments can even dip their hands into the foreign reserve. So there are different ways of, I know we have a lot of money in our foreign reserve now, but it's not enough to say we have $100 billion or whatever in our foreign reserve. How does it translate into affecting the lives of the people? And so when there is need to even touch that money so that you can bring respite politically and economically to the lives of your people, then it's important we do it.
Let's take a look at the speech.
So
I thought you had finished. Carry on, Dr. Barnabas.
Okay, so again, back to what government needs to do. Government should be careful about it, review its protectionist policies so that it does not, because some of these inflationary reactions that we experience is as a result of the policies that we bring in. We are practicing, so I should even ask, what kind of economic system are we practicing? Is it actually capitalism or socialism, or we are tending towards communism, if you like to use that word? So it's important for government to liaise, and that's where the place of teamwork is very important. Government must bring entrepreneurs, experts, businessmen, private individuals, to the round table and discuss on how to get out of this mess. Because using any approach, a kind of military approach that does not bring, the collectivity of the people in terms of negotiation and planning together, may actually continue to affect our fiscal policies as we currently experience.
So in the president's speech to round up the two-day program held with the ministers designates, he referred to the challenges and thanklessness of public service. I'd like your take on that. That sounds somewhat like an indictment of the Nigerian public. Are we particularly hard to please or impatient, in your view?
Well, Nigerians have been even overtly patient, that's the truth. I think that if the president, wants to be sincere with the Nigerian people, which I know is sincere, he should actually thank Nigerians for, re-electing him, despite, what they have faced in the last
Hello, Dr. Barnabas, are you still with us? Dr. Barnabas, are you still with us?
Okay, we do seem
Well,
to
we
have
lost him there. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Barnabas. We appreciate the fact that you've been able to shed light on many issues of national interest.